I have no idea if this is working. This is... Oh, geez. I know I just screwed up one thing. Oh, well. I'm going to leave it. I will fix the title later. Technically, this is still a Monsters of Templeton Middles stream. So we'll just go ahead and do it. So the reason we're here tonight, first of all, anyone who might be catching this live, to the folks who are watching the view on demand, welcome. I'm doing an impromptu Monsters of Templeton stream because, lo and behold, more than 2/3 of the way through the book now, I finally came across what I think is my favorite chapter in the book that relates directly to the main character. There's been one other chapter I really liked earlier in the book, but it really didn't have a lot to do with the main story or the main character, at least not in any way that's obvious at the time you read it. So given that I finally found something I really like, given that everything else I've been saying about the book is so negative, I thought this will be nice. This will be a good opportunity to share something positive. Also, if this is working correctly, you are not seeing me. Hope you're not seeing me at this point. But anyway, you're probably seeing just the title, The Monsters of Templeton. Slightly different way to do streams here. I'm going to experiment with screencasting from the phone so I can have other like informational content up there and stuff. We'll see. This is like the most basic hello world kind of test we can do. All right, so what's going on? So first of all, just a warning to anyone listening, if you are planning to read The Monsters of Templeton, this is not a good thing to listen to. I will be reading directly from the book, late in the book. Spoilers are obviously going to be a thing. So what's going on? So in the story, sort of the nutshell version, our protagonist is a 20-year-old woman who is pregnant by her college professor, who goes home to her hometown to sort of sort out her life. And along the way, weird stuff happens. There's a monster that's, or rather the corpse of a sort of a lake monster rises to the surface in the town's lake. There's a ghost in her bedroom that's been there since she was a child. We learn about family members, or like bits of the town's history where people could start fires when they became overly emotional. But I've struggled a lot with the book overall because I don't find anything to draw me to the character in any way. Whether it's liking the character or disliking them, but taking an interest in where they're going to go and what they're going to do, maybe what they're going to get away with. There just hasn't been a lot. The main character and her mom and so many of the people around her just come off as either, in her case, in the main character, kind of annoying and childish, selfish, and gosh, there's just not a lot there to hang on to. Her mom is kind of the same way. Both of them, the main character especially, is very judgmental towards people in the town. And there just isn't a lot of room for sympathy, at least not from my perspective. And all the other people in the town are fairly thin. The one chapter I mentioned liking from earlier in the book is one on a group called the Running Buds, who are a group of, I think, late middle age to slightly elderly old men who go running every single day, no matter what, no matter the weather, no matter what's going on, no matter how they're doing. And just the voice that chapter was written in was fun. It really stood apart from the rest of the book stylistically. It was its own thing, and I liked it. It kind of worked. But up until, since then, there really hasn't been a lot. There have been little teeny, maybe a certain turn of phrase I like. I've really been looking for something that, something positive I can say about this book, and I finally found it. Now again, second time, spoiler warning. Like I mentioned sort of the overall plot. What I'm going to read tonight has a major impact on the overall arc of the overall story, right? Like this is a big turning point. It's a brief chapter, and I'll read it, and then just talk through it a little bit. back up here. And it's very brief. It's a good example. It's chapter 26. I do not know French. The title is in some French, and if I try to pronounce the French, I will disappoint or upset French people everywhere. just by saying it wrong. Let's go ahead and read. So the setup for the chapter, before I forget, is that our main character, like I said, who has been pregnant, just found out that another character in the story who's kind of in the background, it's her very good friend from college who has been sick with lupus. Her boyfriend and caretaker has apparently just left her. And on hearing the news, our main character, who goes by the nickname Willie, Wilhelmina goes by Willie, was suffering some cramps of some kind, and then she looks down and she's bleeding. She's bleeding badly. And her mom, who is a nurse, rushes her to the hospital. The title in French, however you pronounce it, après storm. I said I wouldn't, and there's why. Obviously, I think it means after the storm. After the ultrasound, which left a slug trail of goop across my belly, after the strange, crumpled psychiatrist who smelled of popcorn and sleep, I waited, shivering in my paper penny, to know whether I had lost the lump. I thought of Clarissa, of Vi, of the ghost in my room drawing thick and warm around me, to keep from imagining the lump still in there, bleeding from its little wrist because it couldn't bear to be born into the world with such a fool for a mother. I imagined it tying a little noose in the umbilical cord and sliding its mole-star head inside. Time ticked on in the hospital. On the floor above, I heard a slow pacing, the shuffle-drag of a sleepless someone with an IV tower. There were the groans of the nurse's shoes, a low murmur of conversation, once in a while a whiff of coffee from the cafeteria down the labyrinthine hall. And under the weight of all that time alone, I thought of our lake monster, those sentries under the dark water, its immense solitude, and wanted to weep for the poor, sweet beast. Such a long sweep of time, such cold. Lemmy looking longingly up at the boats. Jeez, apparently I need to get my glasses checked. Looking up at the boats, zipping atop the water in the same way we watch movie screens to see reflections of ourselves. At last my mother came in, her head down so I could see the zigzag of her part. I watched her holding my breath as she took a chair and pulled it to the side of my bed and sat. She took my hand and kissed it. So I lost it, I said. Okay. I only felt numb, not dismayed, not relieved either. But my mother said nothing for a long time, just rocking a little in her chair, her eyes closed, giving, I presumed, a little prayer in her head. She opened her eyes. She cleared her throat. Then she said, wincing, "When you found out you were pregnant, did you take a test, Sunshine?" "Oh, no," I said. "No test." "Why not, honey?" she said. "My period stopped," I said. "I was nauseated all the time. It was clear." "Ah," she said, and closed her eyes again. Again there rose between us the noises of the hospital and the sound of her foot and its clogged tap-tapping on the ground. Like this, she said, "We don't think, Sunshine, well, that you ever really were pregnant." I blinked. "What?" I said. "Have you ever heard of a hysterical pregnancy? Pseudocyesis, we call it. Gross nervous? I don't know if I'm saying that right. You can manifest all the symptoms of pregnancy without actually being pregnant." "What?" I said. "That's not what happened." Oh. Let's get this going. There we go. Unfortunately, my mother said, it appears to be. No, I said. I'm not crazy, Vi. I missed 3 periods. I was sick all the time. My belly was growing. No, that's not what happened. I was bleeding. There was a lump. Willie, said my mother. The blood was excessive menstruation. The rest, well. Well, I said, hearing the panic sharpen my voice. Well, the brain is sometimes much, much stronger than the body and can sometimes trick the body into believing it is wrong. Or sometimes it's the fear of pregnancy itself that tricks the endocrine system into believing the wrong thing. The psychiatrist said you had a normal profile, just that you seemed to be under a tremendous amount of stress. There was a giant pause, and I could hear a nattering television, a cart going by, a small child wailing somewhere that he just wanted to go home. Oh my God, I said. I can't believe this. She smiled wearily at me and said, You're not the only one in the world this has happened to, Wilhelmina. It's even happened to men, if you can imagine. It won't get past this hospital. Right. Name me one other person, Vi. This is so effed. My mother thought, then said, Mary Tudor, Queen of England. She thought she was pregnant for a really long time. She wasn't, of course. Sterile. I gaped at her. You mean Bloody Mary, I said. You mean the woman responsible for the deaths of thousands of her own subjects. I didn't say, said my mother, biting back her grin, this necessarily happened to sane people. You said I had a normal profile, I said. You do, said Vi, to the best of our knowledge. I'm going to throw up, I said. Well, at least we know it's not morning sickness, said Vi. I watched as the silvery fillings in her teeth flashed in the fluorescence, her mouth opening wide as she smiled. I said, I love you, Vi, but sometimes I think I hate you a little, too. Yes, yes, she said, standing and kissing my forehead. I love you, too. I'm sorry about that. It was uncalled for, and I'm sorry for your loss, truly. I did, I said. I did lose something. I feel as if I did lose something, Vi. She pushed my hair off my cheeks and looked at me in a long and strange way. I know you did, Willie, she said. I really am sorry for you. As Vi left to fill out the paperwork, I passed my hands over my navel again and again. Where I had once felt another heartbeat, I now felt nothing. Air and stomach, fluids and blood, nary a little growing thing in me, nary even the weeniest little lump in the world. And so I waited in the hospital, under the wan humming lights, in the hushed din of so many bodies exhaling sickness and sadness into the cycled air. When I realized my mother must have gone off to give me a moment, I picked up the envelope I'd brought with me, Clarissa's wild scrawl on the outside. I couldn't stand being alone just then. As the night thickened in my high windows, I tore the flap open and pulled out the photocopied pages and read it all once, then twice. Still Vi didn't return. That night, I read the pages over again and again because reading made me forget about Vi and the non-lump and Clarissa and the ill puce light around me entirely. It was a blessing. It was a reprieve. And that is the whole chapter. And so what do I like so much about this? Because obviously, I mean, I don't know about obviously. There's some places along the way that I really don't like. I don't personally like the images of suicide that she describes in the very beginning of the chapter. It feels a little, I don't know, to me it feels a little too sharp for the moment. It could just be me. Hard to say. What do I like? She uses a couple different techniques here that I think are really good. Like I'll look for a couple passages here where I think the language itself is really appropriate to the moment, that the language does exactly the right job for what she wants to do. And then we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the larger, how does the chapter work as a whole. The first description. So let's see. This one. Time ticked on in the hospital. On the floor above, I heard a slow pacing, the shuffle dragged of a sleepless someone with an IV tower. Again, just the rhythm of that sentence. It reads easy. It's a really good image. If anyone who's been in a hospital, it's gonna register. It's gonna really carry a lot of weight. There are the groans of the nurse's shoes, a low murmur of conversation. Once in a while, and this is just perfect to me. Once in a while, a whiff of coffee from the cafeteria down the labyrinthine hall. It so does such a good job at capturing a very particular kind of moment. I've spent not a ton of time in hospitals, but enough time to know this particular moment, It very easily, in a very small space, brings you into the scene, brings you into the place where the character is. Let's see, and let me go on and find another here briefly. The body contract, let's see. And this moment she has towards the end is Vi left to fill out the paperwork. I passed my hands over my navel again and again. Where I had once felt another heartbeat, I now felt nothing. Air and stomach, fluids and blood, nary a little growing thing in me, nary even the weeniest little lump in the world. So throughout the whole story, she has a certain disregard for the idea of, this child growing in her, and that's going to be a touchy subject for people, and how she should or should not feel. What I'm getting at here, though, is the contrast. That up until this point, this against the rest of the book suggests that she had been, that there's more depth to all the feelings we've seen about how she feels about what she's been calling the lump up to this point. Now, in this moment, we see those deeper feelings. We see that she was probably had more feelings than she would have liked to have admitted, which is not surprising, that she felt more conflicted than she was openly letting on. It still would have been nice to see some of this earlier, but this moment works. This moment works really well to bring that across. And then that last paragraph, and so I waited in the hospital under the wan humming lights, in the hushed din of so many bodies exhaling sickness and sadness into the stifled air. Beautiful passage. Well-constructed sentence. Again, reads well. And I'm coming to the realization, I'm learning as I write and as I read more, that the best sentences, beautiful as they are ephemeral. They disappear quickly and leave behind the description, the feeling, the idea, and this does just that. It does that really, really well. Overall, in terms of the technique in the scene, what do we get? We're getting her wondering what's going on with her own health, with the lump. But there are these really nice back and forths where right in the middle of this, she has basically two different threads going. One of them is, or three of them, I guess. One is her inner monologue. One is the conversation she has with her mom. And then in between all those are these little images of the hospital. There was a giant pause, and I could hear a nattering television, a cart going by, a small child wailing somewhere that he just wanted to go home. These things that are both part of the background imagery of the place where she is, things that are characteristic to being in a hospital and the tension and discomfort that comes from that also tie directly into, in a really beautiful, subtle way, the main content of the chapter, which is her dealing with this very real sense of loss from realizing that she was never pregnant. So again, it is a well-constructed chapter. It has beautiful language. I don't love all of it, but who cares? You never learn to love everything, right? And it's given, where the story has been going up to this point overall, it is a really interesting turn, and it certainly makes you wonder what in the heck is going to happen in the last little bit of the story. So, yeah. But like I said, everything I've been saying up to this point has been not awesome. It's not been, I haven't had lovely things to say about it. So actually having something a little more positive to say is nice. And I got to try out this other method of streaming. I'm not seeing anything on the VU meter, so I'm hoping you can actually hear me here. Honestly, I don't know if you really can. Same company makes both the screencaster and the broadcaster, the one that uses the camera and this one that should just be showing you whatever's on my phone's screen. The problem being is that this one does not have a VU meter for the audio, so I've got no idea if you can hear me. So yeah, I guess I'll hit stop and we'll go see how this went. God bless, have a good night, and I will see you again soon. Whoop. I do that. I also got some new hardware that I'm playing with. Whoops. It looks like it may have flipped the screen. Well, that'll be interesting to see too. Anyway, have a good night.